Single dad inherited a shabby cafe. No one wanted until a secret. Code worth millions changed it all. You can't just walk away from something that still remembers your name. That was the last thing Luke Saunders ever expected to read scratched into the inside of an old brass coffee machine. He wasn't sure whether it was meant for him or for someone long gone, but either way, it stopped him cold. The air inside Jitterbrew was stale, like the breath of a tired old man who had given up speaking. Dust hung in the sunlight like forgotten stories. Luke stood in the center of the room, toolbox in one hand, his daughter Emma's tiny backpack slung over the other. She had insisted on bringing it, just in case we find treasure, she'd said. "This place smells like burnt toast and broken promises," Luke muttered mostly to himself. Emma, ever the hopeful one, was already crouched near a booth pulling up a corner of old linoleum. "Daddy, is this where the cowboys used to come?" she asked, her blue eyes wide under a fringe of honey-blonde curls. He smiled, just barely. "No cowboys, kiddo. Just old men with bad jokes and too much sugar." She giggled, and the sound briefly filled the hollow space. Luke hadn't been back in that building since he was 16. Now, 38, with calloused hands and a heart taped together by the quiet resolve of single fatherhood, he was inheriting it from Uncle Sam, his late great-uncle, the only man in his family who ever said, "stay" instead of "leave." The will was simple. The cafe is yours. Do what you want. But check the machine. He had laughed at that line. But now, standing in front of the old Gaggia hands covered in grease and bitter grounds, he wasn't laughing. The machine was strange. Too well cared for in a place that hadn't seen love in decades. And now, after removing the rear access panel, he'd found it tucked behind a metal coil, a narrow flat chip no bigger than a stick of gum wrapped in faded wax paper. Not a will, not a photo, a solid state drive. "What's that?" Emma asked, her voice small and curious as she peeked up from the booth. Luke hesitated, then quickly slipped it into his shirt pocket. "Something your old man probably shouldn't mess with." She tilted her head. "Is it treasure?" He almost said no, but instead, could be. They stayed for a few more hours. Luke fixed a loose hinge on the front door. Emma discovered a stack of coffee loyalty cards that read, "Buy 10, get 1 free," and made it her mission to collect all of them. At one point, she sat at the counter with her chin on her hands and whispered, "I think this place still remembers people." Luke didn't answer. That night, after tucking her into bed in their tiny 2-bedroom apartment above the auto shop where he worked part-time, Luke sat in the kitchen with the drive on the table. He turned it over in his hands, debating. He wasn't a hacker. He wasn't even tech-savvy. But curiosity, that dangerous, persistent thing, nudged at him like a memory you couldn't quite shake. He plugged it into his old laptop. Nothing happened at first. Then a single folder appeared. Vera. He opened it. Encrypted, of course. But there were 3 video files with .mp4 extensions. 2 refused to play. The third crackled to life. Uncle Sam appeared on screen, older than Luke remembered, eyes clearer than they had any right to be. "Luke," he said, voice low, gravel thick. "If you're seeing this, I'm gone. That machine was never just about coffee, and this isn't just some inheritance. It's a burden, one I chose to carry. But now, it's yours." The video glitched, then returned. "They're looking for it. They'll come. Maybe not now, maybe not for months. But they will. The code inside this drive, it's not just math. It's leverage. And maybe justice if you've got the guts for it." Luke sat back, breath shallow. "What the hell did you get yourself into, old man?" The knock at the door came exactly 10 minutes later. 3 short, sharp raps. Then silence. Emma stirred in the other room. Luke stood slowly. No one knew where he lived. No one ever visited. He looked through the peephole. A woman, young, maybe 30. Long black coat, high cheekbones, dark hair pulled into a loose knot. Her eyes were sharp. Not scared. Searching. He opened the door halfway. She didn't smile. "Are you Luke Saunders?" she asked, voice precise, like someone used to getting straight answers. He hesitated. "Depends who's asking." She pulled something from her coat. Not a gun worse. A photo. Of him. Holding the same coffee machine part he'd found just hours ago. "I need to talk to you," she said. "It's about what you found today." Luke's jaw clenched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. It belonged to Samuel Reed. And, if it's out in the world now, we don't have much time." He looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't FBI. She wasn't police. There was something in her eyes, weariness layered with urgency. And, behind that, pain. "Who are you?" "My name's Vivian Tran." And that thing you found, her voice softened slightly. It might be the only proof left that what happened to Sam wasn't an accident. She met his eyes dead on. "And if you don't help me, they're going to bury both of us." Right next to him. The silence after Vivian's words was heavier than any storm. Luke hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath until his ribs ached from the tension. He stared at her, framed by the yellow porch light, the photo still in her gloved hand. "Say that again," he asked, voice low. Vivian stepped forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. "Samuel Reed didn't die in an accident. And if you found what I think you did, then someone's already looking for you. For both of us." Luke's hand tightened around the door. "That's a hell of an opening line." She gave a faint smile, not out of amusement, but fatigue. "I've had worse first impressions." Behind them, the hallway light flicked on. Emma's sleepy voice floated through the gap. "Daddy, who's at the door?" Luke turned, his voice softening like a reflex. "Just someone asking for directions, kiddo." "Go back to bed, okay?" Vivian looked past him, her face changing subtly. "That's your daughter." He didn't answer, just closed the door gently behind him, stepping onto the porch with her. "Talk," he said. Vivian drew a shaky breath. "Sam was a friend. Not close, more like a mentor. I was an intern on one of his projects 6 years ago, back when I worked at Orion Systems." Luke frowned. "That's a defense contractor, right? It used to be. Now it's something much worse." She hesitated. Sam was building something no one wanted to exist. Not a weapon. A safeguard. Luke crossed his arms. "You keep saying things like they're riddles. Just tell me what's on the damn drive." Vivian looked him square in the eye. "A code. One that can control how artificial intelligence interacts with human morality. The original fail-safe." Luke blinked. "You're telling me my uncle built—" "What, a conscience?" She nodded, slowly, or at least a leash for those who lost theirs. He stared at her, then barked out a laugh, the kind that comes from disbelief, not humor. "Lady, I make brake pads for a living and pour coffee for tired truckers. I am not built for whatever movie you think this is." Vivian didn't flinch. "I don't need you to be a spy. I need you to be a custodian. Sam trusted you with this for a reason. Maybe because you're not like them. Maybe because you still believe in good." Luke's jaw flexed, but he didn't speak. A cold breeze rustled the wind chime above them. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked into the darkness. "I watched them bury him without a question," she said, quieter now. "No autopsy, no report, just silence. And now, the last proof he ever existed is probably in your pocket." Luke looked away toward the horizon. The city lights flickered like dying stars. For years, all he'd wanted was to survive the day, keep Emma safe, keep the ghosts at bay. But now, "This you said they'll come," he murmured. "Who are they?" Vivian's voice lowered. "People who understand power, but not consequence. Who see ethics as a bug, not a feature. People who would turn Sam's failsafe into a leash, not for machines, but for people." Luke shook his head. "Then why tell me? Why not go to the press, or the cops? Because the press gets paid to forget, and the cops already knocked on the wrong doors." She paused. I came to the one Sam left unlocked. He looked at her again. Really looked. This woman wasn't just smart, she was wounded. Not fragile, but fractured in ways that mirrored his own. People who'd lost more than they ever said out loud. People who'd kept going anyway. I don't know what you expect me to do, he said finally. I expect you to keep breathing, keep that drive safe. And maybe her voice softened, just barely let me buy you a coffee in the morning. Luke raised an eyebrow. You're asking for help and offering me my own coffee. She smirked. You over-roasted the last one. Consider it quality control. He almost smiled. Almost. Then he said what he hadn't said in a long time. All right. Vivian exhaled like she'd been holding that breath for a year. The next morning, Jitterbrew smelled like ghosts waking up. Luke had unlocked the doors just after dawn despite having no customers in years. The closed sign was flipped for the first time in a decade. Emma sat on the counter legs, scribbling something on a napkin. I'm making a new menu, she announced. This one has hope. Luke raised an eyebrow. Hope's not a flavor, kiddo. It is now, she grinned. It tastes like caramel and doesn't give up. Vivian arrived just before 8. She wore a gray hoodie and jeans, a far cry from the night before. She carried 2 laptops and a duffel bag that probably weighed more than she did. Luke poured her a cup of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. She took a sip, paused, and said, still over-roasted. He smirked. You're welcome. Emma slid over her napkin menu. Vivian read it aloud. Hope latte. Brave brew. Second chance espresso. She made it all up this morning, Luke said. Said this place needed a restart. Vivian looked at Emma, then at Luke. She's right. They sat in silence for a moment. The kind that felt full. Vivian opened her laptop. I'm going to show you something now. You can choose to look away, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Luke nodded. I've already seen too much to pretend I haven't. And with that, they began. Not a war, not a revolution, just a conversation. The first of many that would either heal the world or burn it down. Sometimes the truth isn't hidden in silence, it's buried in plain sight inside the things we never thought to question. Vivian said it softly as the screen flickered to life, casting a bluish glow over the dim interior of Jitterbrew. The morning sun fought its way through the dusty blinds, casting golden streaks across old tables and forgotten memories. Luke leaned forward, arms crossed, trying not to look like the storm in his chest was growing louder with every second. Emma sat nearby at the counter, humming to herself as she drew a superhero pig on a coffee sleeve Captain Bean. She didn't know the world was shifting in real time just a few feet away. Vivian clicked play. The video was grainy. Sam, again this time in a room filled with server towers humming faintly in the background. If they're watching this, he began. It means I failed to convince them the line shouldn't be crossed. He paused, eyes burning with conviction. Viraki was designed to measure intent, not data. It learns ethics from patterns of kindness, not code. It's built to recognize why someone acts, not just what they do. That scares people who have something to hide. The video distorted briefly, then stabilized. I encoded a fail-safe, a lock they can't fake, a signature based on the only variable they can't replicate, a human soul that refuses to bend. Then the screen went black. Vivian shut the laptop slowly. Luke exhaled through his nose. So he built a conscience for machines. And it turns out the people behind the machines are the real problem. Vivian nodded. The ones who want to rewrite morality in binary. Luke rubbed the back of his neck. Why hide it in a coffee machine? Because it was the last place anyone would look, she said. Sam told me once that coffee shops are where people tell the truth without realizing it. First dates, breakups, job interviews, regrets, dreams. It's all there between sips. Luke chuckled dryly. I thought I was just burning beans for a living. Vivian looked at him. Maybe that's what makes you the right person to carry this. You're not chasing power. You're just showing up. That stopped him. Showing up. That's what he did. Day after day. For Emma. For his late shifts. For bills that didn't wait and memories that wouldn't leave. No glory, no grand plan. Just showing up. His voice softened. What now? Vivian opened a smaller drive and slid it across the table. We build a copy. A clean one. One that proves what Sam made is real and that it was buried for a reason. Luke raised an eyebrow. Won't they trace it? This one doesn't connect to the internet, she said. Air-gapped. Manual decryption. I wrote the interface myself. He looked impressed. Remind me never to cross you. She smirked. You'd be surprised how many people already have. The doorbell jingled suddenly. They both froze. A woman stepped in mid-60s floral scarf holding a sketch pad. Sorry, she said startled. Didn't realize you were open again. I used to paint here in the mornings by that window. Luke exchanged a glance with Vivian. Then he smiled genuinely. We're open. The woman beamed. Then I'll take a seat, and a cup of whatever doesn't taste like regret. Luke laughed. Coming right up. As he moved behind the counter, Vivian watched him, the ease in his movements, the way he nodded at the regulars, even the ones who didn't know they were regulars yet. She leaned closer to him when the woman was out of earshot. You ever think about why Sam left it to you and not someone like me? Luke raised an eyebrow. Because I make great coffee. She smiled. Because maybe saving the world isn't about genius. It's about grit. And heart. He paused, holding a mug midair. I used to think I was just trying not to drown, he said. But maybe I've been swimming in the right direction all along. Vivian's eyes softened. And now Luke handed her the coffee. Now I teach the machine what hope tastes like. Emma looked up from her drawing. Daddy, what does hope taste like? Luke bent down beside her and pointed at her scribbled menu. According to you, caramel, and not giving up. She nodded sagely. Sounds about right. That night, Luke couldn't sleep. He stood in the kitchen, the drive in his hand, feeling the weight of a world he didn't ask for pressing down like rain clouds. He looked toward Emma's door. She was safe. For now. The question wasn't if they'd come looking. It was when. And whether he'd be ready. He walked back into the cafe, flicked on the light, and sat at the bar. He pulled a pen from the register and wrote something on a napkin. Then he taped it to the inside of the machine. It read, If this world forgets how to be kind, make sure this machine remembers. He turned off the lights and stood in the quiet, a man not seeking a fight but no longer afraid of one either. People always think revolution comes with noise. But sometimes, Vivian said, wiping her hands on a towel, it starts with the quiet click of a keyboard and the hiss of an espresso machine. Luke stood across from her behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, sorting through a box of parts from the back room. And here I thought I was just trying to keep this old tin can from electrocuting us. Vivian gave him a sidelong glance. You're maintaining a legacy. Don't downplay it. He grunted. Legacy smells like burnt beans. It had been 3 days since they reopened Jitterbrew. 3 days of cautious steps toward something that felt less like survival and more like a mission. The cafe wasn't packed, but it buzzed softly with returning neighbors, a young musician who liked to write lyrics in the corner booth, an elderly couple who used to meet here every Tuesday, a teenage girl quietly studying with trembling hands and dark circles under her eyes. And now, Luke. Luke, who'd once believed his only purpose was to keep the lights on and his daughter fed. Luke, who now reassembled his uncle's life one part at a time, not just in hardware, but in hope. Vivian had moved her gear into the back office. On the surface, it looked like spreadsheets and budgeting files. In reality, she was building a clean room environment, no internet, no cloud, no leaks. Every decrypted layer of VeraKey required manual confirmation and contextual verification. This isn't just code, she'd told Luke. It's a reflection of values. Sam built it to learn from humans, not control them. Luke didn't pretend to understand all the technical jargon. but he understood people, and he understood risk. So every morning they met at the threshold of both. One afternoon, while Emma was stacking sugar packets into an ambitious miniature city, Luke caught Vivian staring at her not with amusement, but with something deeper, something almost wistful. "You okay?" he asked, pouring her a cup of decaf. Vivian blinked, then smiled faintly. "I used to want 3 kids." Luke raised an eyebrow. 3. She nodded. 1 to challenge me, 1 to ground me, 1 to surprise me. He leaned against the counter. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Life. Work." I kept saying, "later." Then later turned into never. There was a pause. Then Luke, quietly, "You'd have been good at it." Vivian looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them, something not quite romantic yet, but filled with a kind of aching understanding. 2 people who had spent so long surviving they'd forgotten how to let joy linger. "I'm still learning," he added. "Some days I'm just trying to keep her from gluing cereal to the dog." Vivian smiled wider this time. "You're doing better than you think." That evening, as the last customer left, Vivian pulled out a stack of decoded printouts. "Here," she said, laying them out. "This is the heart of it." Luke studied the diagrams, flowcharts, behavior trees, ethical hierarchies. This looks like therapy notes." Vivian nodded. "That's kind of what it is." Sam trained Viraki on lived empathy, not simulations. Real conversations, real reactions. Not just how to make a decision, but how to justify one with integrity. Luke pointed to a line of a code. "Delay response if confidence and moral alignment is below 60%. So it hesitates. Vivian's eyes lit up. "Yes, exactly. Machines don't doubt. That's the flaw. But Viraki was designed to doubt on purpose. To ask, is this kind? Is this fair? Am I missing something human?" Luke sat back slowly. Sam wasn't just building code. He was trying to put a soul into a circuit. Vivian grew quiet, and that's what scared them. Just then, Emma ran in from the back room holding a drawing. "It's us," she announced proudly. "Daddy, you, me, and the coffee robot." Vivian chuckled. "What does the robot do?" Emma pointed at the speech bubble. "It says, 'Would you like honesty with your latte today?'" Luke took the paper, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the drawer beneath the register. "You keep all her drawings?" Vivian asked. "Every single one," he said. "Some people build legacies with code. I build mine with crayons." Vivian's smile softened. "You ever think maybe they're the same thing?" Later that night, when Emma was asleep upstairs and the cafe lights were dimmed, Vivian leaned against the window looking out at the quiet street. "Did you know Sam tried to go public once?" she said. Luke looked up from sweeping. With Viraki, she nodded. They shut him down in 48 hours. Not legally, quietly. They offered him a consultant fee and NDA, said it would distract shareholders. Luke leaned on the broom. "Let me guess." He refused. Vivian's voice caught slightly. He said, "If they won't let it see the light, I'll bury it in the warmth." Luke glanced toward the old espresso machine. "That's what this place was, wasn't it? The warmth." She turned to him. "It still is." At midnight, Luke stood alone in the cafe. He wiped down the counters, refilled the napkin dispensers, checked the old machine like it was a child being tucked in. Then he paused, staring at the handwritten menu Emma had taped to the wall. Hope Latte. Brave Brew. Second Chance Espresso. He added a new one with a pen. The Redemption Roast tastes like standing back up. He looked out the window into the sleeping town and for the first time in years didn't feel like he was on the outside looking in. He whispered to himself almost like a vow, "Let them come. I know who I am now, and I know what I'm fighting for." "You ever get that feeling?" Luke said, eyes narrowed behind the cafe window like you're being watched, but the world keeps pretending it's normal. Vivian didn't look up from her laptop. "That's not a feeling. That's intuition, and you should listen to it." Luke tilted his head toward the corner of the street. Parked by the curb just outside the reach of the morning sun sat a gray sedan. Clean, generic, too clean, too still. It had been there the past 3 mornings. No movement, no visitor, no driver visible. He wiped his hands on a towel, masking the edge in his voice. "You think they found us?" Vivian finally looked up, her eyes sharp and suddenly alert. She stood, walked toward the window, and gave the car a glance that lasted no more than a second. "Not FBI," she said. "Wrong posture. Not local law, either too patient." Luke raised an eyebrow. "So who is it?" She stared at the espresso machine for a moment, then answered. "The kind of people who knock only when they already have a key." Luke turned to her, voice quiet but loaded. "You said we had time." Vivian's reply came like a whisper layered with steel. "I said we had a head start. There's a difference." Emma came bouncing down the stairs from the apartment above, pigtails bouncing, carrying a crayon drawing of Captain Bean Saves the Day. She waved it like a flag. "Look, look. The robot saves the whole town with kindness." Vivian's lips curled in the ghost of a smile. "I hope you're right, sweetheart." Luke leaned over and kissed Emma's head. "Why don't you go help Mrs. Ortega stack sugar packets? She loves your towers." Emma lit up. "Yes, my record is 22 before it falls." She darted off to the corner booth. Vivian's voice lowered. "We should copy the drive again, in case something happens." Luke nodded. "What do we do with the original?" "We keep it moving, hide it where logic wouldn't think to look." She paused, then added, "You ever been to a church thrift shop?" By mid-afternoon, the sedan was gone, but a new tension lingered in the air like the echo of a scream you hadn't heard yet. Luke closed early. No explanation, no goodbye. Just a soft bell chime as the door locked behind the last customer. Upstairs, Emma was napping. Downstairs, the cafe was dimmed. Just the soft hum of Vivian's backup laptop and the rhythmic click of Luke washing dishes. "What if we're wrong?" he asked suddenly. "What if we're just feeding shadows?" Vivian answered without hesitation. "Then at least we'll know we weren't afraid to look them in the eye." He dried his hands, leaned on the sink. "I'm not afraid for me." "I know." Silence stretched. Then Luke asked, "How did you meet Sam?" Vivian smiled faintly. "I crashed a cybersecurity panel at Stanford. I was 23, thought I knew everything, and he waited until I made a fool of myself in front of 20 experts. Then walked up after and said, 'You've got the fire, now learn to aim it.'" Luke chuckled. "Sounds like him. He taught me that real intelligence isn't about answers. It's about the courage to pause, to question. Machines don't pause. That's what makes Verity different." Luke stared at the floor, then up at her. "Why'd you walk away?" Vivian hesitated. Her voice broke slightly. "Because I didn't know if I was strong enough to carry the truth without destroying myself." Luke studied her face. No makeup, no armor, just exhaustion worn like a badge. "You still don't know." "Do you?" Vivian looked at him, eyes brimming, not with tears but with honesty. "No. But maybe that's the point. That night, thunder rolled in. It wasn't forecasted. No weather apps had predicted it. But the sky cracked open just past midnight as if the universe decided the truth deserved its own drumroll." Luke was up sipping cold coffee in the dark when he heard it, a sound too soft for rain, too steady for coincidence. A click, not a door, a window latch. He moved quickly, quietly. Reached under the register where he kept the old baseball bat Sam had carved into the words, "Swing with purpose." He stepped into the hallway. Nothing. Then a whisper. "Luke, Vivian." She was barefoot, hair down, holding her laptop close to her chest. Her eyes wide. "They tried to breach the encryption," she said. "Remotely. Which means they know the signature." Luke blinked. But how she cut him off. Someone leaked it. From inside Orion. They've been watching the metadata trail. Even offline they can track environmental changes. Temp shifts, fan spikes. We have to move. To somewhere Verity was never supposed to reach. He frowned. meaning she took a breath. To a place where truth isn't digital, where people still talk, where values aren't filtered through an algorithm. Luke stared at her. "You're talking about my hometown." Vivian nodded. "Your uncle didn't choose this place for nothing." He looked upstairs toward Emma's room. "Then we leave at first light." In the gray haze before dawn, Luke taped a small note to the cafe's front door. It read, "Temporarily closed for repairs. But kindness is still brewing. Be back soon, don't lose heart." And just like that, they disappeared. No big exit, no grand speech, just a father, a daughter, and a woman carrying the last piece of a man who believed the future deserved a soul. "There's something sacred about places where the internet doesn't reach," Vivian said softly, gazing out the window of the old pickup as it rolled down the winding country road. "It's like the noise forgets how to find you." Luke kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. The early morning fog clung to the trees like secrets that refused to lift. Emma was asleep in the back seat, her head resting against a pillow shaped like a cloud arms wrapped tightly around Captain Bean, now with a tiny felt cape Vivian had stitched the night before. "She sleeps better in motion," Luke said, his voice rough from the long drive. "Something about not knowing where we're going." Vivian turned from the window and studied his face. Tired, yes, but determined. There was a gravity to Luke Saunders that most men lost after their first heartbreak or their second mortgage. "You trust me," she said suddenly. "Not a question." Luke gave a small nod. "Enough to put my kid in a truck and drive through 3 states without blinking." "Yeah." She watched him for a beat. "Why?" He glanced at her, then back at the road. "Because you're running toward something, not away from it. And people don't do that unless they're trying to make something right." Vivian didn't answer. She just looked out the window again, this time with a quiet tightness in her throat. They arrived just before noon. A rusted "Welcome to Alder Creek" sign greeted them with flaking paint and a bent metal arrow pointing toward the town square. It was barely a town, more like a memory with a post office. 2 diners, 1 church, a library the size of a trailer, and a gas station that sold fishing rods and moon pies. Luke pulled into a gravel lot beside an old mechanic's garage. A man in overalls looked up from under the hood of a tractor, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, I'll be damned," the man said, squinting, "if it ain't little Saunders." Luke stepped out and grinned. "Only guy I know who still calls me that." The man walked over and pulled him into a one-armed hug. "You disappeared after prom night. Some of us figured you ran off to be a rock star." "Nah," Luke said, glancing back at the truck. "Turns out I became a janitor with a side of espresso and a daughter who thinks kindness is a superpower." The man's eyes softened as Emma emerged sleepily from the back seat. Yours, Luke, nodded. "All mine." "Well," the man said with a grin, "you did one thing right then." Vivian stepped out next, and the man's eyebrows raised slightly. "This, your wife?" Luke hesitated. "She's a friend, with important reasons to be here." The man didn't press, just nodded. "Well, any friend of little Saunders' family. You'll stay at the old Saunders cabin. Still standing somehow?" Luke blinked. "You kept it?" The man's smile turned wistful. "Sam made me promise. Said one day someone would come back and need it more than the spiders did." The cabin was small, nestled between 2 hills, the front porch leaning forward like it had secrets to tell. Inside, dust danced in the shafts of sunlight, but the walls were solid and the floor didn't creak too much. Vivian walked through the living room slowly, her fingers trailing the bookshelf, the faded photographs, the warmth still lingering in the quiet. "He built a place like this," she whispered to remind himself what mattered. Emma opened a drawer and found a deck of cards and a half-finished crossword. Daddy Uncle Sam was funny. Luke laughed. He was. Smart, too. Said crosswords were how he sorted his thoughts. Vivian sat at the table and opened her laptop. Then maybe this is the right place to finish sorting his legacy. That night, with Emma asleep in the upstairs loft, Luke and Vivian sat outside on the porch. The stars were bright, unapologetically bright, scattered across the sky like they belonged to someone who still believed in magic. Luke handed Vivian a mug of black coffee. No sugar, no cream, just warmth. She took a sip and smiled. "It's better when the world's quiet." He nodded. "It's better when you're not afraid." She turned to him. "Are you afraid?" He thought about it, then answered, "I was, of being too small, of not mattering, of trying to fix something that never wanted to be whole." Vivian looked down at her mug, and now he met her eyes. "Now I'm afraid of not trying." There was a long pause. Then she whispered, "That's the bravest thing anyone's ever said to me." Luke didn't smile. He just looked at her, really looked, and said, "You're not carrying this alone anymore." Vivian's voice cracked as she spoke. "I don't remember the last time someone said that to me, and meant it." He reached across the space between them and gently placed his hand over hers. "I do," he said. "Because I've said it every night to a little girl upstairs who thinks hope can wear a cape." Inside the Viraki system was running diagnostics. No signals, no trackers, no surveillance. For the first time in years, it was surrounded by silence, by peace. And for the first time since Sam's death, the code began to open fully layer by encrypted layer, as if it could sense that someone finally was listening with the right heart. The knock came just as the sky turned copper, that strange hour between light and dark when everything feels both sacred and uncertain. Luke froze mid-step on the porch. He'd been refilling the bird feeder with Emma, her tiny hands cupped around sunflower seeds like she was offering gold to the wind. Vivian looked up from her laptop inside the cabin, instantly still. The knock came again. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. Luke turned to Emma. "Sweetheart, go inside. Find Miss Vivian okay." Emma's eyes flicked to the door, then to her father's face. She sensed it, the tension, the shift. "Is it bad?" she whispered. Luke crouched to her level. "I don't know yet, but I'll find out." She nodded solemnly and walked toward the cabin, her footsteps soft like she was trying not to wake a sleeping giant. Luke opened the door. A man stood there, mid-50s, tailored gray coat, dark trousers. Clean-shaven, but his face carried the weight of 1,000 difficult decisions. His expression was pleasant, neutral, but his eyes, cold scanning, missed nothing. "Mr. Saunders," the man said, like they'd known each other for years. Luke's jaw tightened. "You're not from around here." The man smiled politely. "I'm from everywhere." Luke didn't move. "What do you want?" "A conversation." The man glanced at the porch swing, preferably before the sun's gone. Luke stepped outside, closing the door behind him but not latching it. "You have a name." The man tilted his head. "Let's say I'm a representative, someone who values balance." "Funny, Luke said you don't look like someone who drinks decaf or worries about balance." The man smiled again. "Fair enough. I'll be direct. We know you have access to something that doesn't belong to you." Luke's voice was quiet steel. "It belonged to my uncle. It was never yours." The man didn't blink. That's not how intellectual property works. Luke crossed his arms. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you buried him in silence and forged a death certificate with no autopsy." For the first time, the man's smile faltered barely. "You're a mechanic, Mr. Saunders. A barista, a single father. This is a world you don't want to be in." Luke stepped closer. "You're wrong. This is exactly the world I want to be in. Because for once, I'm not fixing something broken. I'm protecting something good." The man's tone cooled. "Do you know what Viraki really is?" "I know it's the last thing standing between conscience and control." He gave a slow nod. "You think you're defending truth. But truth, Mr. Saunders, is a luxury. Empathy is inefficient, and your uncle's invention. It's dangerous, because it teaches machines to hesitate, and hesitation costs billions." Luke didn't flinch. Then maybe the wrong people are in charge of the billions. The man sighed, then reached into his coat. Luke tensed, but he pulled out only a small envelope. Sealed, Crisp, I'm not here to threaten you. We don't do that. I'm here to offer you a way out. For your daughter. For the woman inside. For peace. Luke took the envelope and opened it slowly. Inside, a cashier's check. 7 figures. No conditions listed, but the silence said everything. Take it, the man said. Disappear. We'll finish what your uncle couldn't, without the chaos. Luke stared at the check. Then he folded it once, twice, and dropped it on the porch floor like it was lint from his pocket. I already disappeared once, Luke said, but I made a promise to my daughter I'd stop running. The man's voice dropped. Then she'll pay the price for your pride. That did it. Luke stepped forward so close their noses almost touched. You ever threaten my daughter again, he growled, and I won't be polite about what happens next. The man straightened his coat. We all make choices, Mr. Saunders. Some noble, some regrettable. I just hope you're still around long enough to understand the difference. Then he turned and walked back toward the waiting sedan tires crunching the gravel like quiet thunder. Inside the cabin, Vivian had watched everything from behind the curtain. When Luke entered, her expression said she'd heard enough. That was them, she said. He nodded. They know about Emma, she added. He sat at the table, face pale but fierce. I noticed. She looked at him, eyes softening. You could have taken the check. Luke met her gaze. And teach my daughter that conscience has a price. Vivian exhaled slowly. You're going to get us all killed with that kind of nobility. He gave a tired smile. Then let's make it worth the cost. That night, with the power flickering and the wind howling like a warning, Vivian backed up the last decrypted files onto a physical hard drive encased in ceramic and sealed in a hollowed-out Bible Luke had kept from childhood. He placed it under the floorboards. Old hiding place, she asked. No, Luke said. Sacred one. They stood there for a moment in the dark, the only light coming from the glow of the coffee machine, a symbol of warmth, of stories of something human still fighting to exist. You think we'll win, Vivian whispered. Luke looked toward the stairs where Emma was sleeping soundly. We already did, he said, because we didn't give in. Vivian reached out, gently touched his hand. You're not who I expected. And you're exactly who I needed, Luke replied. Outside, the storm grew, but inside, for now, the signal was still off, and the heart still on. It happened just after midnight. One moment, the old cabin hummed with life. Vivian's quiet typing in the living room, Luke flipping through Emma's sketchbook at the kitchen table, the soft whistle of wind through the cracked window panes, and the next, everything went still. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. Vivian sat back, her screen black. Luke looked up. That wasn't the storm, he said. She didn't answer. Just reached under the table, grabbed the emergency flashlight and flicked it on. Nothing. Dead batteries, or worse, interference. Vivian stood. EMP. Luke went to the window, pulled back the curtain. Total darkness outside. The entire town swallowed. No streetlights, he murmured. No grid. Vivian's voice was suddenly calm. Too calm. They're here. Luke turned. They cut the power to the entire valley just to get us. They don't care about subtlety anymore, she said. They care about containment. From upstairs, Emma's voice soft, confused. Daddy Luke was already moving. Stay here. I'll get her. But Vivian followed, because they both knew she wasn't just a child anymore. She was the reason they were still human in the first place. 15 minutes later, the three of them sat huddled in the attic, candles flickering low. Emma was wrapped in a blanket, cheeks pale but dry. Vivian was scanning through her offline backups on an ancient, unconnected tablet Sam had left buried under floorboards. Luke had his back to the wall, old baseball bat gripped tight. You sure they can't trace this? Luke asked. Vivian held up the device. It's analog. No ports, no network. This thing might as well be a rock with a screen. Luke exhaled. Good. Then let's hope they don't tear the place apart looking for a rock. Emma looked between them. Are we hiding because of your work? Vivian paused, then nodded. Yes, sweetheart. Did you break something? Vivian blinked. No, I tried to fix something too big, and now people who don't want it fixed are coming after us. Emma frowned. Then why fix it at all? Vivian's voice dropped to a whisper. Because silence helps the bad guys win. Emma nodded slowly. Then we should be brave. Luke smiled even in the dark. She gets that from her mom. Vivian looked at him. You talk about her so rarely. Luke's voice turned soft. She was light, bright, but fragile. The kind of person who thought loving meant fixing, until one day she couldn't fix herself. Vivian's eyes were full of quiet understanding. She left number cancer did. Silence. Then Vivian placed a hand over his. She'd be proud. Of both of you. He didn't answer, just held her gaze, and for a moment the darkness didn't feel quite so heavy. Then came the sound. Boots, gravel, soft radio static outside the cabin. Vivian's breath hitched. Luke was already on his feet. Get to the crawl space. Vivian grabbed the tablet, wrapped it in foil, tucked it inside a metal cookie tin, and sealed it tight. They can't scan it if it's in this. He lifted a loose floorboard and motioned for her to go, but she hesitated. I'm not leaving you, she said. He shook his head. You're not. You're protecting the future. She stared at him defiant. He touched her cheek. Vivian, if they find me, I'm just a janitor who ran a coffee shop. But if they find you, you're the key. Vivian's lips parted. But then Emma, trembling, crawled into her arms. And that was what decided it. Vivian climbed down. Luke replaced the board, and then walked downstairs alone. There were 3 of them. Flashlights, tactical gear, no badges. They moved like wolves. Luke didn't flinch. Evening, gentlemen, he said, leaning against the doorframe like he belonged there. One of them stepped forward. You alone. Always have been, Luke replied. Except when I'm not. The agent frowned. We're looking for a stolen device. Luke shrugged. I've got a blender that keeps sparking. Want that? No smile, no banter. We know who you are, the agent said. We know what you're protecting. Then you know I won't hand it over. The man reached into his jacket. Luke didn't move, but instead of a weapon, the agent pulled out a small object, flat metallic. Signal jammer, he said. We're cutting this place off for good. No calls, no transmissions, no witnesses. Luke raised an eyebrow. You always announce your crimes like Bond villains. The man stepped closer. We don't need to, but you deserve to know what's about to happen. Luke stared at the device, then up at the man, and then he smiled. You ever work in plumbing? He asked. The man blinked. What? Luke stepped back. Because sometimes when pressure builds, things explode. He kicked a switch under the counter. The propane stove ignited in a roar. Smoke filled the kitchen. The fire alarm screamed, and chaos broke loose. Upstairs in the crawl space, Vivian held Emma close as sirens howled in the distance. Not fire trucks, police, local, the sound of truth arriving. Vivian whispered, He bought us time. Emma buried her face into Vivian's chest. Vivian kissed her forehead and closed her eyes. He bought us something bigger than time, she whispered. He bought us the chance to finish this. The fire was mostly smoke-controlled, intentional disruptive enough to trigger the town's emergency alert system without causing real damage. By the time the first responders arrived, the black-suited intruders had vanished into the trees, leaving behind only their footprints and a melted signal jammer in the kitchen sink. Luke sat on the back steps a cut above his brow and soot on his sleeves, giving his third statement to the local sheriff. The man scribbled notes on a yellow pad, occasionally glancing at Luke like he couldn't decide whether this was an arson case, a conspiracy theory, or a bad episode of Dateline. You expect me to believe the sheriff said, tapping his pen, that a bunch of guys in tactical gear just showed up in the middle of a blackout, said nothing official, and tried to… What? Steal a computer? Luke shrugged. If I'd told you they were after a coffee recipe, would that be more believable? The sheriff looked him over. You got a record? Nope. Military background. Just community college and a leaky espresso machine. The sheriff sighed. You realize this whole story makes you sound like the crazy one, right? Luke gave a tired grin. I'm okay with that. Truths always sounded a little crazy at first. Back inside, Vivian sat at the kitchen table with Emma, both of them still wrapped in wool blankets. The sheriff had left them alone, temporarily satisfied or just confused enough not to press. Vivian's hands were steady now, but her eyes were sharper than ever. On the table in front of her lay the ceramic-encased drive from Sam's code, now carefully wired into an ancient offline router Luke had dug up from the shed. What you're doing, Luke said as he entered and closed the door behind him. It's not just releasing a file. Vivian nodded. I know. It's a war. Vivian's voice was low. Wars don't always have soldiers, Luke. Sometimes they just have stories. Emma, sipping from her mug, asked, What happens when you send it? Vivian looked at her. Then it's free. Then no one can bury it again. Luke pulled up a chair beside them. You sure it's ready? He asked. She tapped a few keys. The final checksum blinked green. Yes. She paused, fingers hovering above the Enter key. This code, she said softly, it's more than just ethics, it's soul. It teaches artificial intelligence how to hesitate, how to weigh harm, how to feel consequence. Luke leaned in. So it turns machines into… What? Vivian looked at him. Witnesses, she said. It makes them witnesses to human choice. That's what scared Orion. Not control. Conscience. There was a moment of silence filled only by the quiet hum of the backup battery. Vivian turned to Emma. Do you want to do it? Emma blinked. Me. Vivian nodded. You've been the bravest one here. Emma glanced at her dad. He smiled, gave a small nod. Then, slowly, Emma reached out and pressed the key. The screen flashed white. Then the code began to move packet by encrypted packet into decentralized servers across the world. Sam's vision at last leaving the room it was born in. Vivian sat back, breath trembling. Luke reached for her hand. It's done. She nodded. It can't be undone now. They'll try to suppress it, spin it, rebrand it, but they can't unsee it. Enough of the world will know. Emma looked up. Does that mean we're safe now? Vivian and Luke exchanged glances. Vivian answered gently. It means we're braver now. And sometimes that's better than safe. That evening they took a walk through Alder Creek. The power had been restored. The town felt sleepy but untouched the way small towns do after a storm has passed without landing a blow. Luke carried Emma on his shoulders, pointing out constellations as they walked. That one's Orion, he said. Fitting, huh? Vivian looked up. Ironic, or poetic, Luke added. They passed the corner bakery, the shuttered post office, and finally reached the community board outside the diner. Someone had already tacked up a flyer code of Conscience a New Future for AI below. It a QR code and a hand-scrawled message. Sometimes hope needs bandwidth. Vivian stared at it for a long time. You didn't put that there, Luke asked. She shook her head. No. He smiled. Then we're not alone anymore. Back at the cabin, as Emma drifted off to sleep with Captain Bean tucked beside her, Luke and Vivian stood on the porch in the cool evening air. You're not going back to the company, are you? Luke asked. Vivian shook her head. I think I'm done building empires. So, what then? She looked at him, her voice calm. I want to build community. One coffee, one conversation at a time. Maybe teach girls how to write code with a conscience. Maybe write a book. Maybe she hesitated. Stay here a while longer. Luke raised an eyebrow. You saying that because of the cabin? She smiled, slow and soft. I'm saying it because of the people in it." He looked at her long and deep. "Vivian," he said, voice suddenly thick with emotion, "you don't have to be brilliant to be enough." Her eyes shimmered. "And you don't have to be broken to be real." They stood there in silence. No need to fill the space. Because some stories don't end with a bang. Some just breathe. The letter came wrapped in ivory paper sealed with gold foil and delivered by hand. No return address, no sender name. Just one line beneath the flap, handwritten in deep blue ink, "You still have time to walk away." Luke found it on the porch at sunrise, resting on the old wooden step like it had grown there overnight. The mist still clung to the trees. The birds hadn't even started singing yet. The silence was heavy but calm. He turned the envelope over twice before opening it. Inside was a contract. A real one this time. No threats, no bribes. Just a simple brutal offer: walk away. Disengage. Make no further public statements, accept the outcome. In return, full legal immunity for him, for Emma, for Vivian. At the bottom, a deadline. 3 days, and a signature from one of Orion's executive legal counsels. Luke held the paper like it might bite. Vivian found him still staring at it 20 minutes later, unmoving. "Was it them?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Yeah. Threats, no. Worse." She sat beside him. "A deal." He nodded. Vivian didn't ask what the terms were. She already knew. "Are you tempted?" she asked softly. Luke didn't answer right away. His voice when it came was low and honest. "I'm tired." She reached for his hand. "Me too. But this—" He looked at her eyes raw. "This isn't about being right anymore. It's about surviving what happens when you are." Vivian let out a breath long and slow. "You know what they're hoping for. That we blink. That we get scared. That we start rationalizing comfort as wisdom." Luke turned to her. "What if that's not cowardice? What if that's just being a father?" Vivian was quiet a moment. Then, "You can protect Emma from danger, Luke. But don't teach her to hide from truth." He looked down. "She sees what you do," she continued, "not what you say. If you back down now, she'll learn that the cost of peace is silence." Luke stared at the porch floor. Then, slowly, deliberately, he folded the letter in half and fed it into the fire pit. Flames licked the edges until the words vanished into ash. That afternoon, they drove into the next town over a place with faster internet and fewer eyes. Vivian had made a decision. One last message. A video. Not for the press, not for profit, for the people. They set up in a small rented office, white wall behind her, no logos, no lighting rigs. Just a single camera and a quiet resolve. Vivian sat straight, her hands folded in her lap. Luke stood behind the lens watching her like someone witnessing a person become their truest self. She took a breath and began. "My name is Vivian Cross. I was Chief Technology Officer at Orion Systems, and I am the daughter of Samuel Cross, the original architect of the Viraki Protocol." Her voice was steady, clear, clean. "I'm not speaking on behalf of any company. I'm speaking as a human being, as a daughter, as someone who has seen what happens when innovation loses its conscience." She looked directly at the lens. "You were never supposed to know about Viraki. You were never supposed to see the layers my uncle buried beneath the code because what he built wasn't profitable. It was moral. It taught machines to feel the weight of consequence before acting, and that made it dangerous, not because it failed, but because it worked." Vivian blinked once. They silenced him. They tried to silence me, but what we've shared is now public. The code is free, and the only thing they fear more than its existence is your awareness of it. Luke's heart pounded as she continued. "If you're watching this, I ask only one thing: demand better. From your companies, from your governments, from yourselves. Technology should not be made in boardrooms. It should be born in the presence of children because they will inherit its consequences." She paused, just long enough for the words to settle. Then, don't let them unmake what we've started, because the future is watching." Vivian stopped, hands still, eyes firm. Luke swallowed. "That was—" He began, then stopped. Vivian looked up at him. "Enough." He nodded. "More than." They uploaded it. Within 2 hours it had been downloaded to multiple blockchain-verified mirrors. Within 6 it reached underground forums. By the end of the day, a public GitHub archive titled "The Conscience Upload" had gone viral on Reddit. And by dawn, mainstream media couldn't ignore it anymore. "She's trending," Luke said, the next morning phone buzzing non-stop. Vivian didn't reply. She was watching Emma braid ribbons into Captain Bean's cape. Luke sat beside her on the porch swing. "You okay? I'm—" "Still here," she said. "That counts for something." He leaned in slightly. "It counts for everything." Vivian turned to him. "I keep thinking about what you said," she whispered, "about surviving what happens when you're right." Luke met her gaze, and she smiled, faint but true. "Maybe we don't just survive it. Maybe we build from it." There was a silence. Then he reached out gently, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "We already are." 1 year later, the snow returned. Not the sharp, punishing kind that cut through your coat, but a gentle flurry, the kind that blanketed the rooftops like forgiveness. Alder Creek had changed, though no one had made a big announcement. It changed quietly like a healing bruise. The local hardware store installed solar panels. The town library had a new AI literacy program funded anonymously. And where Sam's old coffee shop once stood, now stood The Hearth, a cafe tech hub where people could grab a cup of coffee and learn the ethics of coding in the same breath. Luke stood behind the counter apron dusted in flour, carefully pouring a heart into a cappuccino. His hands had gotten steadier over the year, not from rest, but from purpose. Across the room, Emma sat cross-legged in front of a group of kids holding a tablet in one hand and Captain Bean in the other. She was showing them how to build kindness into a code string like it was a magic trick. Vivian watched from the sidearms, folded eyes warm. She wore less black now. No more stiff business blazers. Today, it was a soft ivory sweater and faded jeans, the armor of someone who had nothing left to prove. Luke set the drink on the counter just as she approached. "Latte," he said with cinnamon on top. "Like you never asked for, but always needed." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying I'm predictable?" "I'm saying you're known," he replied gently. "And that's better." She took a sip, smiled. "Still too much milk." He leaned on the counter. "Still here, though." She looked around the shop. "I've been offered 3 positions this month, startups consulting a university fellowship in Boston." "And yet," Luke said. She nodded. "And yet." They stood in comfortable silence, letting the room breathe. After a moment, Vivian asked, "Do you ever miss it?" The adrenaline, the chaos. Luke looked at her then, over at Emma, who had just burst into laughter with the kids. "No," he said. This is where the real work is. Not in code, but in connection." Vivian tilted her head. "You think your uncle knew it would lead to this?" Luke gave a small smile. "I think he hoped it would. That's what hope is, right? A blueprint for a better world, even if you don't live to see it built." She reached across the counter, touched his hand. "You helped build it." He met her eyes. "We did." Later that afternoon, the 3 of them took a walk through town. Snowflakes drifted like lazy confetti. Emma ran ahead, leaving footprints that crisscrossed the sidewalk in wide loops. She carried a little wooden sign under her arm. Luke noticed it first. "What's she got?" Vivian squinted. "Looks like one of the crafts she made at school." When Emma reached the old town square, she knelt down and stuck the sign into the snow beside the cafe entrance. They caught up just as she stepped back to admire her work. Vivian read it aloud, voice catching slightly. "Kindness is the new code." Below the words was a drawing, a steaming cup with a little heart above it, and 3 stick figures, 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small, holding hands. Luke swallowed. Vivian crouched beside Emma. "Why here?" Emma shrugged. "Because this is where it started." Vivian blinked. "You mean the project?" Emma shook her head. "No, us." Luke stepped closer, pulling his daughter into a hug. Vivian rose slowly and looked at both of them. "You know, she said there are moments that change the world, and then there are moments that change us." Luke looked up, and the world follows. Vivian smiled. Eventually, that evening back at the cabin, they lit a fire. Not because it was cold, but because it felt right, like remembering. Luke poured 3 mugs of hot cocoa. Emma insisted on marshmallows 3 in hers, 2 in everyone else's because fairness mattered. Vivian sat on the floor legs tucked under her, gazing into the flames. "You know what, I think she said." Luke looked over. "What?" "That code. Sam's code. It wasn't about machines making better choices. It was about giving people permission to believe they could." Luke stirred his cocoa slowly. "We keep talking about his legacy like it was digital, but maybe it was something smaller, quieter." Vivian nodded. "Something like love, made visible." Emma, curled up beside them, yawned. "Are you two going to get married, or what?" Luke and Vivian both choked on their cocoa. Vivian laughed first. "Is that how subtle you are now?" Emma grinned. "I'm 10. I don't have time for subtle." Luke looked at Vivian, suddenly unsure, suddenly boyish. "Well," Vivian tilted her head. "Ask me properly, coffee boy." He set down his mug, reached over, took her hand. "Vivian, cross," he said. Voice steady. "Will you stay? Not just in the cabin." But in all of it, the mess, the mornings, the burnt toast, the tired smiles, the whole unfinished thing. She leaned in, rested her forehead against his. "I already have," she whispered. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the fire kept burning. And in the corner of the room, Captain Bean sat propped up beside a sketch Emma had drawn in crayon, a simple line of code beneath 3 stick figures. "If Lovni. Stay." And the beginning of something good. And maybe. That's all we need sometimes. Not a grand revolution. Just one quiet place where love, truth, and second chances are allowed to bloom. Now it's your turn. Where in the world are you listening? From we love hearing your stories, your cities, your hearts, your reflections. Drop them in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that healing is possible, that courage can come in the form of a coffee cup, and a little kindness, please consider subscribing to our channel. We tell stories that restore faith in people and hope in humanity. Thank you for being here, for sharing this moment, for believing in better. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, take care of each other.